Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Talk 20s podcast. And I have a very special guest in the studio today because I can honestly say that this guest has changed my life, because last time she came on the podcast, something crazy happened, and we're going to talk about it loads in this episode, but we have the wonderful Ellie Middleton in the studio for the second time on the podcast. She has a brand new book coming out, How to Be You, which is incredible. I've had an advance copy and it is amazing, and we're going to talk through loads of it in this episode. Full transparency here, we love bringing you guys free weekly content, but in order to do this, we work with different brand partners who you'll hear from in this episode, including an advertisement from Zopa Bank. Hope you enjoy this week's episode. Ellie, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you.
And I said at the beginning, like, you genuinely changed my life coming on the podcast last time, but I don't think you even realised that you had. Like,
yeah, I feel like it was like a couple of months afterwards and you were like, hey, so I don't want to be the person that texts you, but...
I honestly, I think obviously for anyone that comes on the podcast, I go away and I do a ton of research about their chosen topic. If they're an expert, or, if they're a celebrity, I'll go and find out about their life. If they're an expert on a certain topic like you are, I'll go and find out about that topic. And there's me, just searching up like ADHD, thinking I was doing it as research, as prep for our episode, thinking, what? And I start looking at it and I'm going, hang on a second. And then obviously we sat down and we recorded our episode about 2 years ago, wasn't it? It was about this time, 2022.
Yeah, that's wild.
And then 12 months later, I had a diagnosis myself, which is crazy. So I'm a year into my diagnosis of ADHD as well. So yeah, it's actually crazy. And obviously we've been good friends since as well, like massively supported your incredible first book that came out, which is Unmasked, which is amazing. And now you're here to launch your second, which is just so exciting. So first of all, I have a big thank you to say, but this is not about me. This is about the incredible work that you're doing. So yeah, what's happened for you in the past year?
Lots.
Yeah.
I think we were just saying, like, before, when we look back to that first podcast, that was like one of the very first things that I did when I was sort of like, I think I'd probably just gone self-employed at that point.
Yeah.
And then now, like, if I look back at the stuff that I've done, I've like written and published the first book, about to publish the second book, worked with loads of amazing companies, done work that I never dreamed that I would be able to do, done a TED talk, like done all of these things that like baby Ellie sat in that chair would have just had no idea. So yeah, it's been a wild couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's nice. I feel like I've sort of got to a point now where so when I first got diagnosed, it was all that I wanted to talk about, and that was my whole sort of existence of like, I've just found out this thing about myself I want to talk about all the time. I want to like share that with people. I want other people to find out, which I still do now. But I feel like I'm sort of going through like, that was my baby years, and now I'm sort of, I don't know, going into my teenage years of like, okay, that's still a really big part of who I am and my life and what I want to share with people. But like, who am I actually as a person as well? Like, where do I fit into all of this? So I think having the new book is like nice to have that sort of new chapter of like, okay, Unmasked, it's still so important and it's still so nice for that information to be out there. But like, now let's see where we're going to go from this point, I guess.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. We have a little tradition that's new to the podcast, actually. You wouldn't have done this when you came on the podcast 2 years ago, but we asked people to scroll back. Have you got your phone with you to a photo from this time last year?
George has
Can we
got
grab
it.
the phone, G? And show us maybe something that you haven't posted on social media and a little bit of the reality behind your life of where you were this time last year and whether it has changed somewhat. Like you just mentioned there, you've had that kind of switch in kind of like the way that you're approaching life, like an identity thing, I think. Like obviously when you do so much for one subject, you're kind of like, okay, who am I aside from that? Because the world just wants Ellie Middleton that's going to talk about ADHD and autism, right?
Yeah. 16th of July. Got a photo here on the 17th of July.
Okay.
Where I was going to, I think probably like actually my first like makeup-y influencer event. I'm at a collection beach party and it was very rainy.
I love. Because I guess doing this as well, you've also become like amazing.
Baby Ellie.
Gorgeous. In your, what you call your dopamine den.
In my dopamine den, yeah.
Explain to our audience what a dopamine den is.
Yeah, so I'm very lucky to have an apartment that's got like big, like red brick roof, and it's got a very high ceiling, and it's all very fun. So I sort of set out to make it as bright and colourful and joy-bringing as possible. So there's like a big smiley face lamp and a big neon sign on the wall, lots of prints, colourful rugs, all very nice and bright and colourful. I love it so much. I'm moving soon, which is sad. But also, like, again, part of the new chapter of like, actually, where am I? What do I want from life? Where am I going? But yeah, I think the flat's still the same. I think, like you said, like a lot of my job now is social media, whereas probably this time last year it was more of the serious like corporate talks, going in and training companies, and that's still a big part of my job. I still do that, but I think it is nice actually how I've shifted more towards being a bit of a human Ellie as well. So I think people will probably know me a bit more, and I guess like a bigger part of my work is working with like brands that I love and that's more like lifestyle based, and that I can sort of tailor that into also being about ADHD and autism, rather than just like strictly going into a company and giving the same talk and the same information about those things.
Which I think is important in a way, because like everyone who's also like neurodivergent are living their own lives as well, so they kind of want to see it through the lens of, okay, what is Ellie doing, like in the same sense. So I love it, and I love watching your content. But we're going to talk through your new book. So on the table here, we've got Unmasked, which is your first baby, right?
Yeah.
But the second baby's coming out on the 5th of September,
yes,
which is very soon. And you've not actually had physical copies. Like I've seen the PDF, which only the special people see the PDF, right? But you've got physical copies that are being printed and you should have soon. And you're even going to go to the factory to see them.
Yes.
That is exciting.
I can't wait for that. I feel like that will be such a surreal moment.
Okay. Yeah, that will be amazing. But we're going to talk through, you write your books, both of them, in such a very easy, like it just makes sense. Like it's broken down. It's kind of one of those books where you can dive into at any point a bit like you would like a dictionary to kind of find out a certain word or a term or find out about a bit more of a different topic. But also you can get so much from reading it cover to cover. You've got kind of two different ways that you can dive into the books. But you break them down into kind of 8 different chapters, and we're going to go through all of them in, a very brief overview of detail, because if we were to talk through the whole book, 1, you wouldn't buy the book, and 2, there's just way too much for a 45-minute podcast. So we're going to go through the different things so people can get a flavor for the book. But I think, as me, someone who has, been diagnosed with ADHD, there are so many things in there, and I'm like, I've never thought about looking at something like that before, or that's a way that I could incorporate that into my life. That makes things easier. So tell us more about the first book and how that is different to what you've written with How to Be You.
Yeah, so I guess Unmasked is sort of like the what. So it's like, what is ADHD? What is autism? Like, what are the traits? What experiences do people have? So it's more of like the sort of physical experiences, I guess. And then I sort of felt as though that's amazing that people have that information. Like, I'm so glad that that's got into so many people's hands and like helps people to have something to sort of take to their family members or friends and be like, okay, this is what I'm going through. This might help. Yeah, proud of that very much. But then I sort of felt as though, like, you'll know, you sort of get your diagnosis. So we're at a stage now where a lot of people are talking about it. Awareness is starting to go up. A lot more people are having those realizations. But then you sort of have the diagnosis. They go, yeah, you've got ADHD. See you later.
Yeah. Good luck in the
and
world.
You're sort of like, okay, so first of all, like, what does that mean? Which I guess is where Unmasked comes in. But then it's like, well, how do I now use that information to make my life easier and to support myself and to accommodate myself? So I guess that's what How to Be You is. It's all about finding ways of working with your brain rather than against your brain, and just, setting yourself up so you're not always like pushing against the flow. I guess I think a lot of the ways that we're forced to or expected to work in society are not catered for our brains or anyone's brains that functions outside of what we've been told is normal. It's like one way of doing things, exist in this box, do it this way, follow this path. And that doesn't work for our brains, which we sort of figure that bit out. But then there's no sort of, well, if that doesn't work, then what might work? What options have I got? What things could I try? So I think, just trying to, first of all, get people to question that box and that norm that we've been forced into of like, why have we been told that that's the right way to be? Why do we do things that way? Like, can I let go of that a little bit? And then for the things that I guess you can't let go of, or the things that you do want to tweak to work for you, right, well, how can I do those things in a way that's not going to burn me out, not going to stress me out, not going to leave me just thinking, there's absolutely no way I can do this, like, get me out of here. And just, working with your brain rather than against it. So I guess the simple answer is Unmasked was the what is ADHD, autism, and How to Be You is that, okay, how do I work with my brain and how do I make life easier for myself?
And I think you pepper in really nicely, like, what's this that you can just accept is how your brain is, and what is it that actually obviously you can take those actions to be like, oh, this might be an easier way of working, which would therefore make me happier or feel more comfortable or feel like I can function better. So I think, you're not telling people like, this is the one way that you should do things. Like there's loads of different options. And to also go, and if none of these work for you, like that's okay as well. Like you have these sections, which is like, it's absolutely okay if like these things are absolutely fine. And it's like a whole list of things, which I love. So we're going to kickstart with working memory, which is the first big chapter in your book. Tell us a little bit more about working memory and why people with ADHD might have different working memory to someone who doesn't have ADHD.
Yeah, so essentially, like, I guess an overview of all of them. So they're the 8 executive functioning skills, which is what is thought to be impacted or different in a lot of neurodivergent people, but ADHD is autistic people. So it's expected that there's about a 30% developmental delay. So we don't get those skills until about 30% later. And then we also only develop them to, I think it's around 80%. So those skills are where you can sort of see the differences in neurodivergent people versus neurotypical people. So the first one is working memory. So that is not like long-term memory, but it's like juggling all the things that you need to remember and juggle at the same time. So I think this is one that we can...
So relatable.
Yeah. So I guess one example is like, I never leave the house with everything that I need to leave the house with. We both had the thing this morning of Gabby texting me going, hi, have you got a copy of your book? Because I've left home without it. And I was like, oh, I'm just leaving home, but I'll grab one. And then we went back.
And then I still went back and got it just in case. But yeah, that's prime example there.
Yeah, like, it's like that. All the juggling things of like, right, well, I need my phone, I need my purse, I need the book, I need a phone charger. I've not got a phone charger today. I need whatever I need. That's a lot of things to juggle all at once. So I guess the example I use in the book is there's been studies where I think they call it the magic number 7 plus or minus 2 or something. So they think that the normal amount of things that someone could remember is 7. So it's like as if you remember that like 7 balls that you can juggle at the same time. Yeah. They're all the things that you should be able to sort of store. But I think very difficult for ADHDers to juggle all of those things.
Yeah.
It is, yeah.
You know what's funny is I literally had a moment this morning where I was like, don't forget to get the book. Still left without it.
Yeah.
Like it literally that came through my brain. I was like brushing my teeth, but I wasn't in a moment to go and actually act on that like thought that came into my brain because I was upstairs and the book was downstairs on the shelf. And then I literally must have got distracted by something else and then walked out the door. So like working memory, clearly not the best for me. Like, so. My
car parking space at my apartment is like, it couldn't really, it's like basically right behind my flat, but from where my flat is, I have to walk like all the way out of the building and then all the way around the building. And every single time I'm on that walk round to my car, I get about 3/4 of the way around and I'm like, I've forgotten something. And I always end up just having to like pull up in the disabled bay outside my apartment, run in to get the thing, jump back out to the car and shoot off.
Yeah.
Every single time. Like I just,
So how can we support ourselves if that is the case? If that feels pretty normal for us, like we're forgetting things, like what can we ask for? Like what are the things that we can do?
Yeah, so I explained it as, in my brain, it feels like all of these things that I have to remember are like helium balloons. So I'm like consciously clinging onto them, going, don't forget the book, don't forget the book, don't forget the book. And I know if I let go of that, don't forget the book thought, that balloon is out of here and there's no way of getting it back. Mm-hmm. So I try to think of it as like, okay, well, if that's how I feel, then what would be helpful if I was stood with all of these balloons? What could I do to make life easier for myself? Well, I could either hand those balloons to somebody else and they could take care of them for me, or I could tie those balloons to a balloon stand and that would take it out of my hands, but I'd know that it wouldn't float away. So I guess if you try and think of it that way, so some of the things are like sort of automating reminders for things. So have a reminder on your phone that messages you with all of the things that you need, or have a list on your home screen of all the things that you need when you're leaving the house so that you can check it. It's your screensaver. So you just look at your phone, go, yep. Mm-hmm. Off you go. Having your to-do list as a widget on your phone, so every time you open your phone, it's there in front of you, so you're not forgetting it. I think those are really handy ones. And one that I really like that I try to do and I just never stay on top of it is having like a launch pad. So for that thing that we're always forgetting something leaving the house, why not just we all love the Uniqlo bags that fit everything in it. Just have one of those packed all the time with purse, keys, phone charger, deodorant, perfume, whatever you need most of the time to leave the house. Just keep it in that bag. Don't unpack it every time. Don't then think, oh yeah, I'll remember to put it back in. No, you won't. Just keep that packed all the time. Whatever bag you're taking, always just wear that little bag with all of the essentials in it as well as the big bag that you're taking. And just, I guess it's just, if you think of it of that, either handing the balloon to someone else, so having reminders from people or having it automated, or tying it in front of a balloon stand. How can I put this thing in front of my brain so I'm not relying on my brain to remember. I'm just going to see it and it's going to remind me.
Yeah, because I've gone to the office without my laptop before. Like, I don't know how I even got through. I was literally doing work on my phone that day, and I was just like, I don't understand like how I can leave the house without something like a laptop. And obviously something's just, I don't know what's happened that morning, but basically I've come without it. But I've come to understand that like object permanence is, I didn't even realize that what it was before. Can you explain to our listeners what that is? Because for me, that's one of the things that I think I relate to most when it comes to working memory. Hello, gorgeous listeners. If this is the first time you're tuning into the Talk 20s podcast, allow us to introduce you to our headline sponsors, Zopa Bank, home of the Smart Saver account. If you're a long-term fan of the podcast, you'll already know about Zopa's Smart Saver, which lets you save into personalized pots and boost your savings in exchange for a notice period to access your funds. The longest notice period is 95 days and offers the highest interest rate. To find out more about Zopa's Smart Saver, download the Zopa app. We need to tell you that you need to save a minimum of £1 and the interest is paid monthly and is subject to variation. On with the show.
Yeah, so basically it's out of sight, out of mind. Mm-hmm. So if something is not directly in front of you, it's very easy to forget that it exists. So I think this shows up with like things like you say, like if my laptop is not directly in front of me, I might not remember to grab it before I leave the door. But I think it can also show up as like emotional permanence as well. So I find that if I'm not reminded frequently that somebody loves me or somebody cares about me or somebody exists, then I can just sort of forget that, you know, or not know that that feeling still remains even if I'm not being constantly reminded of it, which is a really tricky thing. And I think you feel very needy of being like, do you still love me? Yes, I still love you. Okay, I just need you reminding because it wasn't directly in front of me, so I wasn't sure that it existed. But yeah, I think in terms of like making life easier for yourself, it is putting things where they're gonna be in front of your eyes. So another one is like having your gym bag or whatever it might be always packed and on a hook by the door, so you're literally having to physically walk past it and you'll see it, have it blocking your way so you physically can't get past it. So then you don't think, oh, I've not got my, well, you're going to trip over it if you don't remember to pick it up. So yeah, just basically making it as easy for yourself as possible, plonking it right in front of you.
This is a weird thought that's come to my brain, but I have actually thought it before actually. When it comes to like the ways that people like to like receive and show love, just because you mentioned it right there, obviously you've got what are the things called where it's like the words?
The love languages.
Love languages. That's what I'm going to think of. Do you think that people with like who are neurodiverse are more likely to have things like words of affirmation as their love language?
There's actually a viral tweet that circulates all the time, and it's like the 5 neurodivergent love languages.
Okay.
And I think it was like pebbling's one of them, which is like when you sort of like similar to gift giving, but like say my friend who I used to live with, she told me that she liked bees. So now still, I've not spoken to her in a couple of years. Every time I see something that's a bee, I'm like, oh, I should buy that for Alona.
Yeah.
Because it's like that, oh, I know that you're interested in this thing. So here's how I can show you that I've taken notice of the fact that you're interested in this thing. And that could also be with like articles or something. So if you know that I'm interested in something, you might see an article and you'll go, oh, Ellie would like that. I'll send that. Yeah. That's like the pebbling thing. It's to do with like, you know, like penguins like take pebbles.
Yeah.
That's like where it comes from. I can't think what the other ones were, but I do think, like you say, words of affirmation. Like for me especially, I need to be told what's going on. If you don't tell me, I don't know what we are. I think that shows up in not even just like love languages, but like in like dating,
communication,
friendship. Yeah, like I need to know what's going on here, because otherwise I don't have a clue if we're like friends, acquaintances, if we're dating, like if we're in a serious relationship. I need that to be told directly. I think the other one was like parallel play as well. Like I love to do like, I don't know, someone's sat, they may be watching the football, maybe they're playing music, whatever it is, and you're sat in the same room doing your activity, and you're not necessarily communicating via like talking, but you're just both in the same space, both relaxed, both doing your activity. I feel like that's a very like neurodivergent love language as well.
Love that. The next chapter in the book is all about self-monitoring, which I think I definitely do more of now that I'm diagnosed. I think it's something that maybe like as you become aware of something, you naturally start to do more of it. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think self-monitoring was like a really tricky chapter to write, because it's like sort of technically it's, you know, the research says, or these developmental delays would suggest that self-monitoring is difficult for us. But actually, because of the, I guess, trauma of living in the world as a neurodivergent person, a lot of us are self-monitoring Olympic champions because we've learned the fact that, okay, well, if I don't, so basically self-monitoring is just like kind of in the name, checking in with yourself about the way that you're behaving, the feedback that you're getting, the way that you're communicating. Like, am I existing in a way that is working for me right now? Am I getting the results that I want? And because of things like masking, because like for me as someone that spent a long time undiagnosed, I've had to learn the hard way that if I don't self-monitor and if I just exist as myself, well, that's not well received. So I've had to learn to like double check, triple check everything that I say, every way that I say it, every tone of voice that I use to make sure that it's sort of not like offending anyone or not going down well or whatever it might be. So I think that was a tricky one to write, because it's like, well, I don't want to encourage people to do more of that sort of like self-shaming or negative self-monitoring of like, oh, I need to make sure that I'm existing in the way that everyone else wants me to be, rather than in a way that's positive for me. But also it is helpful to use self-monitoring in a way of like, okay, how do I feel about this right now? Like, is this making me feel uncomfortable? Do I feel relaxed? Do I feel stressed? Like, do I need anything from the people around me? Am I missing anything right now? So I think it was like a really sort of like fine balance of like, how do you encourage people to check in with themselves for themselves, I guess, more than checking in with themselves to please.
Else. Yeah, it makes total sense. And I think, you know, you use things like apps like Timo, is that how you say
it?
You know, things like visual timers and stuff to like have that kind of check-in that you wouldn't maybe not. Sometimes you're doing like the self-monitoring, but sometimes, you know, we're going, okay, have I like brushed my teeth today? Sort of thing, like the actual looking after yourself side of things.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, Timo is great. You can like schedule in. I guess you could do this on any reminder. You could set an alarm on your phone if you wanted to, but Timo is really handy because you can make like a list of sort of, they have a template of like questions just to have like an interoception check-in. So it's like, when was the last time I ate? Like, am I hungry? Am I thirsty? Have I been for a wee? Like, have I moved? Because I think that's so easy for us to sort of, zone out from that checking in with our bodies.
Focus on something that you're so obsessed with and you're like, oh my God.
Gets to 4 p.m. and you're like, I've not.
Headache. Yeah. It's because you've drank no water today, Gabby.
Like, so having like a nudge to just like check in with your body. And I think like emotion-wise as well, because I think a lot of the time, I find that I don't process things until a bit afterwards. So like something will happen, maybe someone will ask me a question or say something to me and I'll not realise, or I'm so like busy just in the moment. And then later on I check in with myself and I'm like, oh, actually, how do I am I okay with that? Like, did I want to say yes to that thing? Did I want to say no to that thing? So I think, like physically checking in with yourself of like, am I looking after my body right now? Usually no is the answer. But then emotionally, like, okay, how do I feel about that? Like, do I need more time to process it? Like, do I want to go back and clarify or whatever it might be?
Absolutely. I think one of the things that is probably very noticeably different for people who are neurodivergent is like inhibition and impulse control. Like I think that's very visible thing to see in your loved ones who may be neurodivergent. What did you learn from writing this book, and what have you learned obviously from all the research that you've done, like about impulse control?
Yeah, I think like one big part of it was like, actually, depending on the context, that can be one of the biggest strengths that come with it as well. Like I don't like the superpower narrative because I feel like that minimizes all the challenges we face. But actually, if you're thinking of, I don't know, an important, like you're running a business, you have grown it massively, you've been really successful, your ability to make quick decisions and go with them is part of that. If you were 100%. Someone that sat back and was like, no, like I just need to see and wait and think about it and weigh up all the options and plan this and plan that, actually your ability to go, let's do this, let's do that, I feel like this is going to be right, let's lean into it and let's do it. And change as well when things aren't working. I feel like it's easy as someone that's quite impulsive, if I'm bored of doing something, I'm like, I'm going to do this instead. So I think that's actually a real big strength sometimes. So again, it's finding that balance of like, we're not saying that you need to like sort of cover that up completely and try and erase it from your existence. We're just saying, okay, sometimes that's a really handy thing to have. Other times that's not great. Like I used to all the time book holidays without really having the money for it, not knowing if I could actually get the time off work. I would just book stuff all the time without thinking about it. Look, at the state of me, I'm absolutely covered in tattoos because I would go, I would want that tattoo, and I'd get it straight away. I mean, every hair colour there possibly is on the planet, because I would wake up and go, I want purple hair, and dye my hair purple.
But like, you can't get that out of your brain. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, if something does genuinely, you know, that it is an impulse thing, I will not think about anything else until I've actually, like, you know, like, for example, last night, guys, this is going to sound so boring, but like, I realized that I really needed to go through my credit card bill. And like, it was like 11 o'clock at night. It was 11 o'clock at night. And I was like, I know I'm doing this podcast with you tomorrow. And I was like, but I just kind of need to know what's going on with my finances. And like, I need to do that before it X amount of day. I wouldn't have been able to sleep.
Yeah.
And so I'd have sat down and gone through it and gone, okay, so I'm moving this money into this one, because I'd have just sat there in my sleep and tried to do it in my sleep without actually doing it. So like, I was feeling like so impulsive, like, even though this is just something that's come to me really late at night, I feel like I need to do it, otherwise I can't.
I feel like that's the thing as well, like sometimes you do just need to scratch that itch.
Yeah.
So one of the tips that I've put in the book is, one thing that I'm really bad at doing impulsively, or used to be, not so bad now, is like, if I've not had the best run in dating, and if something would happen, like if it was like an argument, or if it was like a breakup or whatever, I would paragraphs, and I'd have to say the thing, I'd have to get it off my chest. And I'd look back the next day and think, why did I even say that? I actually don't even care that much. It's just like, in the moment your emotions are so high, and also you've got that impulse thing of like, I need to send this right now, they need to know right this moment how I feel about them. So
I think a lot of people can probably relate to that.
So I think like one way that I found of like scratching the itch is like, you have that impulse, you need to talk about it, you need to send the risky message, send it to your friend instead. Set up a group chat with just you and your friend on WhatsApp, give it a name that's like the person's name or whatever, send the message to them, so you've still got that buzz of like the press send when your stomach goes, ugh. You're still doing that, and you're tricking your brain almost of scratching that itch of being like, okay, you've done the impulsive thing now, but you've not caused the damage that would come with doing that.
Absolutely. I think it's one of those things where like, I've seen, actually, I think Leanne has it in her A to Z book of ADHD, of like the car park of like ideas.
Yeah.
And sometimes like there's too many things going on. Like I also wanted to prep for the podcast last night, but for some reason I did that credit card thing. But I actually probably could have put that off for a little while. I needed to look at what was the most important car in the car park that I actually needed to drive. And actually it was probably sleep. And secondly, it would have been prepping for the podcast that I've got in the morning. And third, it would have then been looking at my finances. Like I actually, that analogy, I think sometimes really helps, of just going, okay, you can only drive one car at a time. That doesn't mean that all the cars don't exist. It just means they're parked for the time being.
Yeah, I think as well, like doing, because you're actually physically doing something by writing it down in that car park. You're still, again, like scratching that itch of like, I need to do something with this. And I think with the working memory, that helps as well, because I think another thing for me is like, I've just had this amazing idea for a video, or for a new business, or for whatever it might be. If I don't act on that right now, I'm going to forget about it, and then
lose interest in it.
Yeah, and I think that's that panic. So I think by actually putting it into that car park of ideas, you've sort of scratched the itch, because you're physically doing something, you're putting it somewhere to come back to later, but also you don't then have that panic of the balloon floating away as well.
Is there anything, other tips that you'd have for like really for people who are impulsive, the ones that are likely to go on a shopping spree, likely to book the holiday, likely to send that text that they would later regret, likely to say things they've in person that they might regret?
I think the like financial wise, I like all of Tanisha's tips in there. So Tanisha, some of the tips are probably helpful to say, they're not all me. We've got like loads of different people sort of sharing their favorite tips. So Tanisha is a neurodivergent like financial advisor, and she's shared a few different tips about if you're impulsive with money. And one of hers was like to write post-it notes on your bank card of like what you're saving for or something. Like if you go to, first of all, take it off Apple Pay, because that is dangerous if you are someone that's impulsive, because it's too easy. Put in those steps, so you have to physically stand up, walk to your bag, get your card out of your purse, and then you see on your purse, on your card, that it says holiday fund or wedding fund or whatever it might be. It's just that thing that stops your brain and goes, oh, actually, do I want it that much? I think that's a really handy one of those like visible reminders of like, okay, why is following this impulse right now? Again, it doesn't mean you can't do it ever, but it means right now we're working towards this thing, so let's not do that. I think that's a really kind of easily implementable and handy one to use.
Absolutely. The next chapter in the book is emotional regulation, which I think is probably for me, probably the hardest one of those. I think the rest I kind of get around it and kind of try and use the benefits of what neurodivergence has. But I think emotional regulation is probably the one that is the trickiest at times. For people that may not have heard that term before, what does emotional regulation mean?
Yeah, I guess it is just, we are very prone to feeling our emotions in a very intense and extreme and all-consuming way. And I think this is why a lot of people end up getting misdiagnosed with bipolar, borderline personality disorder, because I actually went through a phase before my diagnosis of thinking that I had borderline personality disorder, because it was wild how fast I could go from being on top of the world to like literally sobbing in bed. Like, things affect me so deeply, and I can go from one to the other. So that could be like sadness, I think, is a real, like, rejection, I think, is a big one for a lot of us. And then also, like, it shows up for a lot of people in anger, just like snapping. And I think the reason why it's so difficult is because there's so much shame that comes with those things. Like, I think when it's like to do with like functioning and productivity, it still is very difficult, and it still like brings a lot of people a lot of like trauma of being told that you are not thinking that you're stupid or lazy or whatever it might be. But I find personally that you can sort of separate it from yourself a little bit, whereas like emotions is literally like how I am feeling and existing as a human being. It's not just like, can I achieve this thing? It's like how am I, like who am I, like what am I feeling? So I think, yeah, it's a really tricky one, and I think again one that's never gonna disappear. You're not just suddenly going to go, okay, yeah, I can regulate my emotions. But I guess the basis of most of the tips is just like stepping in before that sort of spiral keeps on going, because I think for a lot of us it's like one small thing can tip you over the scale, and then you will spiral and spiral and spiral, whether that's like thinking about the thing that's making you upset, or worrying about something, or getting more and more angry about something. A lot of the tips are just sort of like, okay, how can I step in and cut off that spiral before it goes too far? So I think a really simple one is like the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I can't remember what order they are, but it's like 5 things I can see, 4 things I can smell, 2 things I can, I don't know, taste. I can't remember the order, but basically all of your senses, and just having that little quick check-in of like, okay, it's just pulling me out of this cyclone in my brain and back into my body for a second, without expecting me to like be like, I guess, too logical, because it's not saying, okay, you need to stop that completely, because sometimes sort of like the impulsing, you do need to like follow that feel and just like process that feeling and feel that feeling, but finding ways to like bring yourself out of the spiral before it completely takes over everything, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the other things that has an impact on emotions sometimes is like outside substances. So like one of the things you actually talk about in the book is that you've been like toying with sobriety, and you haven't had a drink for quite a long time, I think.
That's my brother's chapter.
Oh,
it's my brother's sober.
Yeah.
But yeah, actually, so my brother wrote the chapter. My brother's been sober for 18 months.
Okay.
And yeah, he has found it to be like the best thing for his brain. I think he specifically, I think a lot of people will be able to relate to this. He is very like to the extreme, the all or nothing ADHD. Like he couldn't just go and have 1 pint at the pub. He'd have 12 pints, or like he can't just have 1 biscuit. If the packet's opened, he's having 12 biscuits. And I think a lot of us sort of do experience that all or nothingness. So he sort of made the decision to be like, okay, I can't do it in moderation, so I'm just not going to do it at all. And he's been sober for, it was like not the New Year's Eve just gone, the New Year's Eve before, so about 18 months he has been sober. And I'm sort of on and offing at the moment. So I did like a month, and then I had 1 drink a couple of weeks ago when I went to it was like an influencer event, and I was like, oh, it's loud, it's busy, I'm not going to enjoy this if I don't have a drink. And then I had a drink and I was like, actually I didn't need that. And then since then I've done about 3 weeks sober again, I think. So it's something that I've toyed with for a while. I think I don't have as much of the all or nothingness with it. Like I can just go for a couple of drinks. But I do think I notice now that I don't really get like sicky hangovers. I just get sad hangovers. Like if I've gone for a few drinks, for like multiple days afterwards, I just feel like I could cry at anything. And I think more and more people actually are starting to realise the effect that alcohol has. Like I feel like, I guess maybe even 5 years ago, it was just not really spoken about. It was just a normal thing. You just dealt with it. Whereas I think now a lot of us are questioning actually if 90% of the time I'm doing putting all this hard work in to feel better and to like feel good about myself, and I'm going to therapy and I'm going to the gym and I'm eating well, why am I then ruining that by going for a blowout on a weekend and feeling awful afterwards? So yeah, I think my brother has definitely, like, the difference in him from doing that is huge. And I think that's like a very proud like thing to see, of like, actually that's a really big decision to make. Like he's 24, that's a really big decision to make as a 24-year-old, that you're going to cut out something that in our society, I guess, does tie a lot of social situations together. But I guess like, yeah, overall from that, it's like maybe thinking about sobriety full stop. But I think anything that like is against that pattern of like, if I'm doing all of these things that are trying to make me feel better, and then I'm doing this one other thing that is just ruining that every single time, maybe that's going back to a toxic partner, maybe that is a friendship group that makes you feel unhappy every time you go and see them. Like, why are you always going back to that one thing? It's a really difficult pattern to break. But yeah, I think just stepping in and seeing it as what it is like really important in helping you to feel better generally, which is going to mean that the lows are hopefully less low.
Here's a little reminder about our paid partner, BetterHelp. We know that your 20s can sometimes be tough and it's hard to find good therapists to talk to. If this is something you're struggling with too, why not check out BetterHelp? As a thank you for listening, we have a special link that gets you 10% off your first month. Click the link in the description or visit betterhelp.com/talk20s. And I think also for me, it's also about adding in the things that I know make me feel better, like exercise. Like sometimes it's really hard to go, but like actually adding that into my life has the opposite effect of what having like a drink or, you know, spending time with someone that I don't love spending time with, all those kind of things. Like it's a bonus, but like sometimes it feels hard to get it in, but I know that will 100% help me like with my emotional regulation.
Yeah, so, I feel like with those things, it's like those like really annoying like mum pieces of advice that feel so annoying to hear, but they're just right, where it's like, you just need a good night's sleep. You're like, shut up, mum, it's not, I'm not just tired, like this is serious, this is like extreme, like the world is actually ending, like don't just say that I'm tired, that's so annoying, like what? And then you have a good night's sleep and you do actually feel better about it. Like it's not cured everything, but you do feel a lot better. And it's the same thing of like people saying like, yeah, exercise regularly, and you're like, shut up, like it's not just like I need to go for a run, but actually if you go for a run you probably will feel better afterwards.
Yeah, for sure. No, definitely. Flexibility is another one in your book. Tell us about a few of the tips that people can work through to ensure that like why they might feel differently about being flexible about things and how they might be able to think about it differently.
Yeah, I think again flexibility is something that is very like portrayed negatively, especially in like the autistic diagnostic criteria. It's like sort of like inflexible adherence to routines. It basically makes out that we won't change anything ever, and we have to stick to the same routine from the moment that we wake up to the moment we go to sleep, which often isn't the case. We just like keeping certain things the same. Like I generally will always have the same breakfast every single day, and I wear the same clothes a lot of the time because it's just one less thing to think about, and I just like having that sameness and that routine. So I think again with the flexibility, my main sort of piece of advice was like, if you want to keep some things the same to allow yourself the freedom for other things to change, then that's fine. Like I know that if I keep to my same routine of having that same breakfast every day, like having my same nighttime routine that I know calms me down before I go to bed, then it frees up my brain space through the day if there is last minute changes and there is panic, because I'm sort of grounded by those things that I have kept the same. So I think that was sort of an important thing of like, don't feel like you have to suddenly be like so chilled and laid back and cool girl vibes that you don't mind flexibility all the time. I think a big one was like the autistic inertia kind of things. I think that one's a tricky one for me. So that's basically around the idea that it's to do with like, so the physics definition of inertia is like, if an object is in motion, it will stay in motion, and if an object is still, it'll stay still unless an outside force comes into play. But it basically means like, if you're stopped, it's difficult to get going, and if you're going, it's difficult to stop. Which I experience a lot in like singular tasks. So for example, it's really difficult to start writing, but once I'm writing, it's difficult to stop. When a lot of us will be like, one more minute, and you just keep going and going and going. But I think I also experience that a lot in the macro as well. So it's like, if I'm in a busy phase of life, even though I know that I need to rest, I find it really difficult to stop. It's like you're on a treadmill and you can't stop the busyness. And then similarly, once you do actually wind down and stop, it's really difficult to get going again.
So true.
So I think sort of like knowing where that comes in and how you can and help with that. So one of the tips was talking about, so if you struggle between like moving between tasks, have something that stays the same between that. So for example, if you know that you need to, like you struggle with getting out of bed in the morning, start listening to a podcast or watching a video while you're in bed. Take your phone with you to go and brush your teeth with that video still playing or that podcast still playing. so then you've made the transition, but you've sort of tricked your brain because some things stayed the same the whole time. So you've got that sameness, but you've managed to make the transition. That was one that I found, I think on Reddit or something, when I was just like frantically Googling these things. But I think that one's like, I've noticed that like I tend to get into bed before I've like done everything that I need to do to go to bed. So I'll like be on my phone for a bit in bed, and then I'll go, oh, I need to get up and brush my teeth. And that's like the worst thing, that my brain's like, no, we're here now, we're not moving. Whereas if I do that, if I just like, I don't know, watch a TikTok and take that with me, it's like, oh, I'm here now, I've made it.
I love that. That's such a good tip. Planning and prioritization. Like sometimes I think we can excel in this area, and sometimes I think they're the things that are so much harder for us as well. Tell us a little bit more about planning and prioritization.
Yeah, so I think, like you say, especially for people who are both autistic and ADHD, this can be like, you know, some things of my life, like I'm going traveling in January and I've already started to make lists of like the hotels that I want to stay in or the restaurants that I want to visit or how I can get between each place. But then other things, like I'll literally wake up in the morning and be like, oh, I need to be this place today, or I need to have done this thing today and I've not planned it, or whatever it might be. And then with prioritization, I think that can be really tricky with like starting a task. Like, for example, I don't know, writing a book, that's a big project. You're like, well, where do I start? What's more important to start with? What's important to go in that book? Because I know more information than would fit in the book. So what do people want to hear? Like, what's important? Like, that can be really tricky for people.
It's overwhelming.
Yeah, I think it is so easy to just like sort of get frozen because there's so many different things to choose from. And I think another example I gave was like, one where I can go round and round in circles is like, okay, well, at some point today, I need to shower, but so I want to go to the gym today as well. So I won't shower now because I'm going to go to the gym. So there's no point in showering before the gym because I need to shower after the gym. Okay, so I'm going to shower last, gym before that. Okay, well, if I'm going to go to the gym, then I need to eat something before I go to the gym. Okay, so I'll eat first, but then I can't eat too soon between. It's like all of these different things. It's like working out the order of all the things that you need to do. My brain, I won't end up doing any of it because I'll spend so long trying to work out the order. And if I've got time to do all of those things and all of the different steps that come in it, my brain's just like, what is going on here? So that's a tricky one for people, I guess. But I think one of my favorite tips for prioritization was like prioritizing different things each month of the year, because I think like you can, you know, sit down in January and be like, this is what I'm prioritizing this year, but that's a really long time to stay accountable to something, and you don't really know what's going to come up in the meantime. Whereas if you have like a focus of the month where it's like, okay, this month I really want to prioritize getting enough sleep, then your decisions, you sort of have the answer when it's like, oh, do you want to, I don't know, come to this party, or do you want to take on this extra project, or no, I'm prioritizing sleep this month, so I'm not going to do that. Or one month you might want to prioritize, okay, I really want to get into a good gym routine. I'm prioritizing the gym. It's easier to then make decisions based on that priority of the month. And it can be all sorts of different things. It could be like, I'm prioritizing community, so I'm going to say yes to more plans over going to the gym this month because I really want to prioritize, like that's what I feel like is important to me this month. So I think that's a really nice thing to like bear in mind, of like, you don't have to prioritize the same things forever either. And I think that's another way that it really shows up, of like the way that we've been told of the right way to prioritize is like, you have to prioritize your career, you have to prioritize other people's opinions, you have to prioritize this. Well, why? Who said that? Like, maybe my career isn't the most important thing to me right now. That's okay as well. So I think knowing that it doesn't have to be what society expects it to be your priority, and also it doesn't have to be like solid, it can be fluid over time.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. I think it's one of those things that is kind of like, it's difficult in the moment to kind of like think about all those different steps that you want to do it. But if you kind of take I guess it's like a zoomed out approach where you go, okay, well, what's my month's priority rather than what am I thinking up right now? You can then, that can like lead what you're going into. We kind of already covered task initiation. I mean, like actually like getting started, like moving from task to task with like the flexibility and that, because a lot of these do intertwine as well. But I think one of the things that are really interesting about kind of getting started on a task is like replacing demands with permissions, because that was something that I hadn't even realized was something that, like, you know, when someone tells you you've got to do something, I'm far less likely to want to do it than if I'm like, you can do something. Like, I don't, why is that the case?
Yeah, so demand avoidance is, so it used to be thought of as like a separate profile of autism. So it used to be called pathological demand avoidance, and people thought that it was like almost like type of autism. So you had PDA autism. Now we're sort of changing the way that we view it, of being like just another part of the autism spectrum. So it's an experience that people have to higher or lower extents. And instead of calling it pathological demand avoidance, a lot of people prefer to call it a persistent drive for autonomy. And I think that sort of explains better what it is. Like from an internal perspective, it's like, I want to be in charge. I want to be in control. I want autonomy. And it shows up for like, I guess, different neurodivergent people to a greater or lesser extent. But yeah, so it might be like you were planning to empty the dishwasher and then your mum comes in and says, can you empty the dishwasher? And you're like, no, not now you've told me to do it. I can't. I was about to, but now I can't. But I think it shows up for so many other things. Like for me, if there's like an external pressure on something, like we used to have the Unmasked community as like a subscription model, and just knowing that people were, even if I didn't have anything actually to do at that time, like there wasn't a blog that needed to be written or a message that needed to reply to, just knowing that people were like paying for this subscription felt like a demand to me all the time, because it was like sort of a weight on me. So a demand could be sort of an expectation, or like having an employee. I've really struggled. I've tried hiring people to help me, and I just can't deal with the fact that someone's like reliant on me. That feels like a demand to me as well. All different ways of sort of like external pressure or demand or expectation to do things. And yeah, I think just first of all, knowing that you work in that way is like you say, a big light bulb moment of like, that makes sense now. Like I'm not just a bitch because I can't do it. Like I'm not just being difficult because I'm saying no to things when people ask me to do it. It's basically like that external pressure sort of like triggers your nervous system, and then you just sort of freeze, I guess. But yeah, that was KR's tip. So KR is they run a lot of writing courses. So I did their course Writing While Neurodivergent, and they got us to do this exercise. And it was basically like, so for example, if you know that you need to write your book, you might stress yourself out and think, I need to write the book, I need to write the book, I need to write the book. And you can't write the book because you're stressing because you know that you need to write the book. But then you're shaming yourself for doing anything else, where actually the things that lead me to making progress with the book don't necessarily look like me forcing myself to sit down and write the book. So I could tidy my desk. That would get me closer to being able to sit down. I could read other similar books or books that I might find inspiration from, because that's getting me thinking. I could watch videos about the topics that I'm writing about. That would get my brain sort of flowing and give me ideas to shoot off. I could brainstorm different structures or chapters or whatever it might be. All of those things that are still getting me closer to the book being written, but it's not as much me going, you need to sit down and write this book for an hour. My brain's going, well, I can't do it now because I feel the pressure. If you give yourself that permission of like, I can do any of those things, and that still counts towards getting closer to the book being written, but it's not, going, you have to do this at this time now or you're going to be in trouble. It's like, well, if I do any of those things, like that's great.
If you want to know what we're drinking here in the Talk 20 studio, then let me tell you, because you're going to want to try it. Riviera Iced Tea is the newest sponsor of the Talk 20s podcast. It's low calorie, natural, vegan, and gluten-free. I'm absolutely obsessed with iced tea. I've just been laughing here about how obsessed I am with iced tea with our producer. It's my favorite drink in the whole wide world, no exaggeration. And the peach iced tea from Riviera is genuinely the best I've ever tasted. So if you want to fill your fridge with something super refreshing, head to rivieraicedtea.com or check out their Instagram at Riviera Iced Tea. Absolutely. I think there are so many tips like that in the book that there is just like, I wish we could, if we did a podcast on the book, we'd be here for like 700 days. But there are so many, there are points in there when I'm like, God, this is so good and this is so good, that I think that like most days I feel like if I'm facing a challenge that could be linked back to like being neurodivergent, I could go into that book and be like, okay, well, here's something that I could do that would make me, think about things differently or try something a different way. If it's something that's getting me down, sometimes you accept that's who I am. And sometimes you want to go, no, I'd really like to write my book or, record that podcast or go to sleep earlier. And like, I think there's something in the book that can help with everything. One of the last tips in the book, and we're running out of time, but one of the last chapters of the book is about organisation, and in there specifically homely hacks. Can you give us a few, or just one maybe, homely hack that has maybe changed your world in terms of, how you organize your home.
Yeah, so this tip was actually written by Sherry, who's maybe better known as Forever Yours Betty. She is wonderful. If you go onto her Instagram, you'll see her home is like the actual dream home. I would love to move in. It's so bright and colourful. It's so amazing. But she said, like, when she was designing her kitchen, normally you would have like a cupboard for like, I don't know, your dry ingredients, and you would have a cupboard for snacks, and then you would have a cupboard for, I don't know, they'd be separated into sort of like types, like categories of food, rather than, she was like, actually, it's easier for me to organise my cupboards by the thing that I need at that time. So do I need like a snack that I can just grab, like, I don't know, granola bars or a bag of crisps or something like that? Do I want to make a 5-minute meal, or do I want to sit down and actually make a full meal? And having her food stored in that way, so then you know that you need a snack, and you're not just opening a cupboard and looking at all of your dried food and going, what do I want to eat? You're going, no, right at this moment, I just need a grab and go snack. So you're opening it, and then you've only got the grab and go snacks to choose from. Or if you want a 5-minute meal, you're opening it and seeing your 5-minute meals. I think that's a game changer in terms of, because I think that's something that we can all relate to, of opening the fridge and going, oh God, I don't know what I want to eat, so I'm not going to eat anything, because I can't, my brain's not working right now to work out what goes together, what ingredients I've got that will make what. I think that one is a huge one.
Such a good hack.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, there are thousands more in the book. Like, I don't know how long did it take you to write that book?
I had the literal shortest deadline. I think I had like 3 months to write it, which is
how. I mean, that just shows like you at your finest, because clearly you were like, you battled through all the demand avoidance, and you literally got it done, because that. It's such a great resource. And I know you're my friend, but I would, even if I didn't know you, I would be bigging up, because it's a really, really great book. We always end the podcast though, and you'll know we did do this last time when you were on the podcast, by asking our guests what one piece of advice they would give to their 20-year-old self. Now, obviously you've got so much advice in this book, but 20-year-old Ellie was undiagnosed. So if you could like just go back to her in like, ghost form, and literally be able to say one thing to her that would see her through her 20s, what would you want to say?
Yeah, I'd say one that's like very relevant at the moment is like, it's okay to feel however you're feeling. Because I think at that time when I was undiagnosed, I was experiencing like a lot of low mood, depression, anxiety. And I think I was just so focused on like getting better. Like I just used to sort of, as much as I could, lock it all away. Like I went traveling, I went and worked abroad. I was just like, do anything I can to run away from these feelings and avoid them at all costs, because I just want to be better. And I think the result of that now is that there's so much that I need to work through that is so locked away now, because I've run away from it like so many years ago. So I think like, it's okay if you're feeling sad right now to have a sad day. It's okay if you're feeling happy right now to enjoy that and have a nice day. And it's okay to feel however you're feeling, I think is a big one. I think there's so much, especially for those of us who do struggle so much with emotional regulation and do have bad days and good days. You sort of think, I don't want to feel sad anymore. I'm not doing it anymore. I'm doing everything I can to make myself feel better. And then sort of in the long run, those feelings need to be felt. So I think that would be my big one of like, it's okay to feel however you're feeling.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Ellie. It has been incredible to have you on the podcast for a second time. Hopefully there'll be a third, fourth, fifth time. Like, honestly, I just love everything that you're doing. Good luck with the new book launch. It's going to be amazing. And everyone can, grab it from Amazon, Waterstones, their local bookstore. But, it's an absolutely fantastic tool for those who want to learn more about neurodiversity.
Thank you so much.
Amazing.